So I called up all of my designer friends and leaders in the UX community and asked them, how can a beginner UX designer start a project from scratch? In our last episode, we learned how to ask better questions and define our UX problem statement. In this episode too, I will teach you how to approach the interface design of your app and find references for each and every design component using Mobbin. By the end of this video, you will have design checklists for analyzing your client brief or PRDs, creating your first design system, collecting and referencing UI inspiration, and developer handoff. We're also giving away free subscriptions to Mobbin. Details will be revealed at the end. So just to revise the context, assume that I'm a solo UX designer working at a finance consulting firm called OpenLedger that wants to make a mobile budgeting app for iOS. They have never made an app before, and it's traditionally a new consulting firm that is targeting businesses and startups. They have developers and product managers, but they don't have any mobile design experience. So in our last episode, we made a list of most important features, and now we have a rough PRD. Now, as a solo designer, I have to do 3 important things at this stage. Step number 1 is reading the PRD. And as I cover each and every section, I should keep myself accountable for noting down all possible issues or even start visualizing how the app can look like. Then step number 2, find similar apps on Mobbin and collect all of their screenshots and take notes of how they have solved their problem. So here is the PRD that I have received from my team. The overview states that this is a budgeting app called FinWise, which is designed to help users take control of their personal finances by providing an intuitive way to track income, expenses, and saving goals. It simplifies financial management for individuals by categorizing expenses, providing insights, and allowing users to set and track budgets. When we look at the business goals, number 1 is increasing user retention by providing daily engagement features like reminders and progress tracking, drive adoption by creating a simple intuitive interface for users unfamiliar with budgeting tools, and achieve 10,000 active users within the first 6 months post-launch. So I think number 3 is primarily not for the designer, but mostly something for the marketing team.
I mean, I only stick to Mobbin. I stopped using Dribble and Behance, 4-5 years ago. Now it's only Mobbin. And I think what is very important is to build a habit of downloading apps, testing them out, checking them out, comparing different apps.
See, one mistake that I see people make while finding references are they go too specific. For example, I think the thing that you mentioned is it's a finance planning app. One of the mistakes that people will go doing is just look for finance planning apps. They'll go search for finance planning apps or finance apps or bank apps. That's the biggest mistake that they do, right? Sure, finance is what you are making, but any app has got a lot of different patterns which you will have to use. There will be a list, there will be a filter, there will be some actions that you do, there will be some primary action, secondary action, there will be a place where you will do some big announcements, there will be search and all of them. For example, if I'm trying to get references for search for my finance planning app, I don't have to look at finance planning apps. I can go and look at search experiences for anything and everything. I'll probably get much better references looking at other apps than restricting myself to the domain that I'm working on.
Sometimes you might just not find inspiration for what you're looking at. So then you need to find inspiration for smaller elements. Like that's what I'm doing right now. Since as a tax and compliance software, there's not much anywhere. Like nobody posts screenshots of that, or nobody's talking about very niche tax and compliance software. Like something like Swiggy or Uber, like everybody has made case studies. You can use it very easily yourself. But a tax portal, I can never use myself. Or I can't use an accounting, like a competitor accountant app myself because I just don't have the data. I don't know how to use it. And the screenshots of it are not available anywhere because it's so niche that nobody is looking for inspiration there. So Mobbin or somebody like that would never cover apps like that. So what I'm doing, like what we are doing as a team right now is we look for pattern inspiration. Like if we were to look like, okay, if a filer has to do this task, let's look at the equivalent of that in another app. So I would say, okay, how does somebody on HubSpot send a cadence? Like they have to follow up a lot with it's a similar kind of a situation. So a filer has to follow up a lot with their customer. So probably a marketer has to follow up a lot with their customer. So we try to find like similarities in the function. And we're not finding exactly like, okay, this we can, use from here. And then we try to see like best practices for a particular component. So say, for example, I'm looking for a search component. So now I'll go to Mobbin and see the very like go and type search and see how they are using search. And then I'll see what fits our use case the best.
From an education POV, in the cohorts, we use Mobbin as a way to actually teach design patterns. So, for example, on Mobbin, you can even see which patterns are used more versus less. So like, for example, if I'm going to cards with images, it says 300 patterns versus 3,000 patterns. So a little bit, it helps me realize, oh, this is a common pattern versus, this is not so common. So design education, we use it a lot as a way to benchmark. So what are the patterns available? What's the benchmark on each of these? But a very similar process to what you're describing. It's discovery, going out there and finding screenshots, saving this to a FigJam, having this available to the entire team.
So I think first thing that I've understood is you don't have to invent the wheel. And, you can take inspiration from already existing platforms that are there, designs that are out there. You browse, as you said, Mobbin, Pinterest, Dribbble, Behance, already existing products that are there. They are very, very valuable inspiration. So if you're suppose going to design food delivery app, look at what Swiggy and Zomato are doing already. It's working for them in some way or the other, right? So I think that is something that I definitely do. Try to see in that domain space what is already existing, try to take screenshots of that and collecting that in one space.
So I would say this way, when you start designing something, you don't start, going on Figma, but then you have some sort of idea that this is how it would be. It's going to have this, it's going to have that, it's going to have this kind of a page, it's going to have this kind of a transition state, this is going to have this kind of an end state and so on. So those states are kind of vaguely in your mind. The idea is to get references for each of the states, multiple references, and 5-6 references, good ones. Once you have that, I think that's where you stop. Because it doesn't have to be that you find references, then you start, and then you don't get back to finding references. You can always get back to finding references, right? So put an end state so that you can begin and then get back if needed.
You also need to keep in mind the business goals, right? The KPIs that your brief will track. So in this PRD, we've not mentioned any KPIs, but we've mentioned the target audience. We've also mentioned a list of features. When you are understanding your KPIs, you have to make sure that you balance your user needs and the business needs.
I'll be very honest. I feel like when you're a beginner, it's not possible to do it very well, at least from experience. Like I'm talking from experience. I would rely on the people around me to teach me. I would rely on the founder to tell me what the business needs are. And since as designers, we are more prone to thinking from the user's point of view. I've seen that at least like from the designers that I've met. I know that we're more inclined to thinking from the user's point of view. So I don't think there you need so much of an effort, but I do feel like on the business end of things, you should just ask when you don't know. And you should just tell the founder that I don't know these things. I expect you to teach me, and please call me out when I'm not, call me out when I'm not understanding what I'm doing. And yeah, like I think that's the way to go for a beginner at least.
You're looking at the business needs or business requirements from that project. If their key performance indicator is increase in sales by reducing friction in your checkout process, then your target should be to lower the user's friction during that process, decrease confusion, decrease any problems, or reduce the number of steps. There are a lot of solutions that you can come up with. Inadvertently, you are actually solving users' problems while solving the business requirements in this case, because if the user has a good checkout flow, their problem is being solved and the company benefits as well. So you have to have some sort of a balance between what the user requirements are and what the business requirements are.
The thing is, a lot of companies don't set up KPIs because to actually set KPIs and follow that, you need a really good structure. Small companies, they have KPIs, but it's very high level. It's not something that is given a lot of importance, and it's just there to be there, right? So if you're a junior designer, there is a good chance that you might not really understand about KPIs, because when it comes with KPIs, you actually need to have systems in place to measure these things. You need to be able to A/B test these things. You need to have the infrastructure, the bandwidth. You need to have a lot of things in place, right? And when you are a scale up and you're really growing really fast, the CEO is not really going to care about these things most of the times, right? Of course, there are exceptions, but this is the case. So the best thing would be to actually my recommendation is to observe other players, other companies, speak to designers, speak to other companies, speak to designers from other companies, your friends, right? I think get information from there if you're not able to get that from your company, because it's not something even a designer can go and say, hey, we need to have KPIs. The founder probably already knows that, but this is not the right time to have a very organized structure of KPIs and things like that, right? And the KPIs are also going to be very straightforward. For example, look, we need to get these many app downloads by the end of the year, right? That could be probably your first KPI, and that's about it, right? But only when the company scales, you have more products and services to offer, when you have larger teams, when now focusing on revenue rather than growth to an extent, and when you want to be profitable, that's when KPIs become very important. So for a junior designer, if you're not getting this opportunity, I would say you have to spend your time outside learning about this.
Now, you have to read through this entire PRD and specifically note down how small things might make a big difference, right? For example, if I go to the very top and if I read the target audience, they have mentioned young professionals as the primary persona who wants to build better financial habits. Now, young people in general prefer to stay on apps that have sufficient visual delight. So let's go on Mobbin and let's see what else can we find. If I go here, this part right here looks very clean, enough visual delight. So it's, just you collecting inspiration as you go. And I understand that when you're going through this process, there's like so much of confusion and you barely know where to stop. So you have to keep a timeline for yourself. And when you have the list of features available with you, right? So for example, the PRD says that these are the must-have features, and then you have the nice-to-have features. You can search all of these things and then go to Mobbin one by one. For example, if they talk about user profiles, so I can simply copy the name of this must-have feature, go to Mobbin and simply search for it. And within seconds, I have all of my user profiles in one single place. And the beauty of this is that you're not restricted to just financial apps. When it comes to designing the interface, right, when you're absolutely beginning, understanding the priorities is the most important thing, because it is on you. You have to decide how much time are you spending on each of these must-have features.
The way I think about it, like the simple framework around this is benefits over features. So users don't really care about all the features that you have. They care about what benefit will I get from each of these. So that's the simple way of thinking about it. But then even while you're designing, you want to think about, there is no real point of having a bloated app that has all these features. Like the other problem, right, is when we look at inspiration, we look at apps that are on version 200 out there. And we don't really realize that most apps started with a very limited feature set, like one or two benefits done really well. And then they figured out user needs and then built on top of that. Versus starting something, you feel like, shit, my app needs to have everything because the apps I use have everything and they give multiple benefits. And so that's a tough standard to beat. But I think starting out, you want to have a core set of benefits or like as limited of a feature set that is maximally beneficial. And, I'm talking about apps, but even when you're designing, let's say a website for this or a website for anything, like people love saying feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, and then screenshot, screenshot, screenshot. But I think the better way to approach it would be, what's the benefit that I get? What's the problem that's being solved? And in the end, it is about the connection, that users should feel like you've understood them well enough such that you can actually, with confidence, provide that benefit.
So in our case, we have 5 must-have features, which is supposed to be the phase 1 of this app. But when you're making the phase 1, you also have to keep in mind the nice-to-have features which might be included in the future iterations. For example, if we already know that there has to be a category for customizable categories or multi-user sharing, then these are some things that you have to consider today. You have to allocate real estate in the core components that you're making. And this is very, very important, because if you are aware of these future plans in the first stage itself, then you can accommodate certain placeholders and certain component elements inside your core components. They might be hidden in phase one, but if you have that perspective of where this app is going, it really, really helps. And please note that I'm not covering the execution of creating the design system or, importing those libraries, because I have already explained those steps in utmost detail on learnuiux.in. In fact, we've created a 15-episode course. I'm not sure if you folks have even seen it, but we have created this free course where you can learn all of these things. So whether it's about design system or approaching your UX problems on Figma, all of it is available. If you feel that you're very weak in Figma, then these videos right here will teach you the tiniest of details and features, all for free. I'll share the link in description. But if I had to give you a basic list, you cannot start designing all of these things unless you have declared your neutral gray color palette, your typography, your buttons, your inputs. You have imported your icon packs, which can be either box icons or remix icons, and both of them are free. I'll put the Figma community link in description. Everything else can be declared on the go, but without these 5, you cannot design. Another very cool feature that Mobbin has is of component-based search. So if I go here and if I go to UI elements, inside my filters option, you can see there's literally every single component beautifully organized. So if you literally had to just check out a bottom sheet, you can go through tons and tons of bottom sheets. You can further divide it into app categories. So if I want to see bottom sheets just in the domain of finance, that is also available. It is a huge game changer. But yes, before you get into this, you have to declare those 5 components, those core components. Again, I've explained all of it on learnuiux.in in this part in week 4. Now, let's see how we can take inspiration for the first must-have feature, transaction management using Mobbin. So what I'll do is I'll go on the search bar and just type the word transaction. And then let me teach you how I would find patterns, right? And by the way, you remember in episode 1, I taught you how to use ChatGPT for it. You should totally do that. But let's just say I come to Revolut, right? So I really, really love how as soon as you click on a screenshot, on the bottom left, you can see where all of these screens are being used. So if you click on, say, analytics, it will lead you to the flow where this screenshot is being used, which is a game changer, because in my search, I am able to see all of these things. And if I want to see the context in which this one specific screen is being used, then I can see that it is being used in all of these crazy, crazy places. So it's a huge, massive shift in the way designers will do their work. You can also comment as well if you want, and you can share this with your friends as well. But overall, when I look at patterns, I always ask myself, what is the visual hierarchy of the information that they're adding? For example, everywhere they make sure that the most important thing is the balance. Everywhere they're using circular icons, and they make sure that there is one heading and then there's subtext with the timestamps. They are using a specific color for debits, another color for credits. Some of them are actually using a bunch of colors. Some of them have kept very minimal. The entire architecture always follows a list-based model. It's all vertical lists. There's no carousels. There's no horizontal scrolling. So of course, I will not go too deep into how you can find patterns, because that itself is a very, very nuanced process where we have to take the brief and figure out that how are they creating their transaction. For example, if I were to click on this, right, the right way to find patterns would be to analyze all of these flows with your eyes and list out all the things they have mentioned in the flow, all the things they are doing in their flow, all the edge cases that you feel are important in your own context. And it's always great to have these conversations with your PM. So once you have collected all of these screens on Figma, it is absolutely great to have a brief conversation with the developers. Do you think we can make something like this? Do you think this is easy to develop? Because as I said, you not only have to design for aesthetics or for the users, but you also have to keep the business constraints in your mind. Apart from this, there are 2 more websites that I wanted to share. So one is checklist.design. It's an incredible website. So for beginner designers who are not able to, make all of these pages and elements properly, the right way to do this would be to go on Mobbin, and then let's just say you want to make your login screen, right? So if I go here and type login, I can simply choose the login screen and then I can choose, say, a finance category. So now I have a lot of inspiration, right? But again, what if you want to go deeper into this? So on checklist.design, if I click on login, it will actually give you a detailed checklist of everything you need to do, the mandatory stuff, the optional stuff. And they have done this for different elements. They have done this for different flows. And these are the most common things. And it is beautifully documented that you will be amazed to see that all of this information is available for free. There's one more website which might not be useful for our iOS work, but it's called Component Gallery. So on Component Gallery, I have a bunch of design systems that I can take inspiration from, but the real game changer is components, where they have made a list of all common web components. And let's just say I go to the file upload one, right? So just for the file upload component, they have 34 examples. And if I click on this, I can actually go through and check out all the documentation, behind this. And it is extremely detailed. Now, I would strongly recommend you to combine Mobbin's web inspiration with the documentation they have on their website. So this thing right here is very limited. They barely have any options, and it's like scrolling through all of this is extremely inefficient because I can barely see the component visually. But when I go to web, here I have access to all of my screens. So if I go to web and in my UI elements, if I literally go to say accordion, you can see how accordions are being used across different products. It's a huge game changer. Now you can search anything here visually, and then if you want to go through the component documentation side of things, where you want to go really deep into the edge cases, then of course you can search for the same thing here on Component Gallery. So I personally feel that combining Mobbin with all of these extra tools can help you finish your work way faster. Now, if I come back to the PRD, tech stack requirements is not relevant for us, but design constraints, this is pretty important, right? Now, talking about constraints, the document says that we have to follow the Apple Human Interface guidelines. And if you're in an iOS team, it should be mandatory for you to read the HIG guidelines. So if I go here and if I just search for HIG, this is the official documentation written by Apple, and I'll tell you which ones are the most important. Patterns, extremely important. You cannot skip this at all. Components, even in components, not all of them are important, but at least you can sort of skim through this because a lot of these might not be relevant to you. But layout and organization, 110% extremely important. So if I open any of these, right, if I go to labels, Apple has neatly explained the best practices, the platform considerations, every little thing has been explained in a very simple manner. It should be a must if you're a designer working in an iOS team. But make sure you document all of this because there's just too much of content.
Great thing is things like HIG, which is Apple's design system, already has everything documented on their website very well. And you could explain it to like a 5-year-old. They've tried to kind of keep it very simple. There is, if you are looking at it as a designer, chances are you won't look at the code aspect of it at all. All these design systems do have a code aspect of it. Just look at the philosophy behind the design. Once again, the explanation of why something is being done is already listed out on Apple HIG or material design, for example. Make sure that you import their official libraries into Figma. Chances are the entire asset library will be imported. So you'll have every digital element that you require: buttons, cards, paragraphs.
Now, the PRD also says that we have to ensure all screens to be optimized for both iPhone 13 and iPhone SE screen sizes. And I also feel like iPhone 16 Pro is also supposed to be included here. So make sure that when you're designing, right, on Figma, you actually check your screens across different phones. And I'll show you one more crazy cool feature that Mobbin has. Let's just say I go to a fun app that has been in the game for a long time, right? So let me go and search for, say, TikTok. Now, if I go to TikTok, I can actually click on this icon and see how TikTok has evolved since March 2018. Isn't that absolutely incredible? You can actually see the evolution of how these apps look like. And to be honest, this should be a huge inspiration for you as well. because this will teach you how these apps have evolved. Like nobody, like even an app like Duolingo, which is considered to be a very, very good design team, when they started in 2018, this is how things looked for them. I mean, not that bad, but my point is that Mobbin gives you the option to see timelines of interfaces as well. So I would recommend you to make sure that when you are creating your interfaces, you should, go through how the apps have evolved, what were their priorities when they started. And when you're creating your timelines, please make sure that you have dedicated times, allocate very, very specific days for at least 6 important stages. So first is your wireframing, and when I say the word wireframe, a lot of people visualize them sketching and making something on the iPad. That's not important. Different people have different wireframing techniques. And a lot of people replace wireframing with low fidelity UI. So low fidelity means that you're not making the final UI, but you're just sort of in the middle of a very ugly looking black and white box based wireframe and the final wireframe, right? So you're using your colors, you're using your typefaces, but it's all very rough. I'll be honest with you, many designers do not even follow the traditional wireframing model.
I think you start building it slowly. Again, start with very minimal components, start with navigation fields, input fields, even like just understanding what the kind of like typography you want, the kind of color system you want. Very basic things you can start with and then build on it.
Wireframes are of so many varieties that you can wireframe at any stage. If you are working with PMs, chances are you're wireframing on a sheet of paper. Most PMs don't know how to run Figma through and through, or they might not know how to run a tool like Palsimic, for example, if you're using that for wireframing. Now, wireframes can be very scrappy, even digitally. I worked with some designers who were literally just copy pasting elements from another app's UI, turning it into a black and white, reducing the saturation and just making it black and white and just placing it as if they were playing a puzzle. I'm sure you've kind of faced that same thing yourself. So that is how some people got away with wireframing, and that was actually effective because it was visually appealing. Someone else has done the work for you and you're just copy pasting, and it kind of looks like a high what do you call that, when someone kidnaps you, they send you a note with different letters from a magazine. Yeah, it kind of looks like that at some point. So that is something that you can always pull off. And last but not the least is the high fidelity wireframe, which has some dummy information laid out. It might or might not have colors depending on how much time you have. But in most cases, it's going to be black and white. High fidelity is very close to, say, the final product, but without the colors, without the images, without the content, without everything else. It's kind of a stripped down version of it in most cases.
I will tell this without any hesitation. I don't believe in wireframes. I have probably done wireframes maybe 5 times in my entire career. I don't find the point of wireframes. For me, I need to directly design high fidelity mockups. For me, that's how it works. And this is something that I've realized because I've done wireframes and I've realized this is a waste of time. This is not helping me. I like to focus on the problem solving aspect and the UI at the same time because they're sort of connected with each other.
They just keep on making low fidelity designs again and again till the point that it just automatically becomes high fidelity. And high fidelity is the final screens. By the way, in 2021, I had written 2 very, very important Medium articles. So if you go on Medium and search Ansh Mehra Medium, this is the time when I was working at Zardal and I was building their design system. There are 2 articles that I would strongly recommend you. One was on how you can navigate your career as a UX designer at a new startup. So these are extremely important tips. I've mentioned a lot of important things that I had learned with concrete examples. I've actually made these examples myself. The second one was on how you can organize your Figma pages using header components. So it's extremely detailed. It's a very, very small thing, but if you have this practice from day one, trust me, your PMs and your developers will love you. Like this annotation and this kind of organization will help your company scale very gracefully. Now, once your final UI is done, you actually need to start making your component system. So you need to allocate time for that as well. So design system creation. And once that is done, you have to make a dedicated page for your developer handoff and explain your developers all the important edge cases that your components will have. So a website like checklist.design and all of these things, they will help you pull this off very effectively. And please make sure that when you do your handoff, you are using a Figma prototype and not just a Figma page. There is a lot of nuance that just gets missed if you're just looking at static screens. And by the way, even if I go to Mobbin and if I click on any of these screens, you'll be able to see that in my Mobbin, I can actually move from screens to prototype. So I can actually click and see how it looks. And to be honest, even this level of prototyping is good enough. It's great if you're able to add the animations. I would recommend you to have at least a basic static prototype so that you can also check whether I've completed all the edge cases or not.
Like we write flows on top. We write, like, say for example, editing a profile just for simplicity's sake. So then we'll write editing, the flow name will be on top of the section name. And then there'll be a lot, like there'll be a happy flow, there'll be a like when error cases for everything. And then we leave a lot of notes. So the engineers don't end up reading the notes as much, but then at least you remember why you took that decision. And now we're making Loom videos when we're handing the files over so that the person, like the engineer, first of all, can go back and forth, like they can keep looking at the video and seeing. And the person who has to do testing also can see the video and see how they have to test the design finally.
Once all of this is done, 80% of your work is complete. You give it to the developers, they will make the UI, and then you'll have to test the UI and check if they have created the final product in the way that you had actually designed it. One hack that I would like to give you is the difference overlay mode. So let me show you how it works. Is that, let's just say I have this screenshot right here. Okay. And let's just say this is my Figma screen. I will paste it right here. Let's assume this screenshot right here is from my Figma file. This is the screenshot from the developer's phone. So this is the developed outcome. This is the designed outcome. What you need to do is you have to put this into a frame. So for that, I had Option Command G. Take this image and put it on top of the screenshot. So you have both of the screenshots on top of each other. And now I will go to Appearance and then choose Difference. Now, if your developer has made it exactly the way you had designed on Figma, you will see no outlines. It'll be black. But if there's any gaps, you will see these outlines. And that is the exact way to quickly figure out where all is the delta. It's a very, very easy to understand trick, extremely useful, when you're doing a developer handoff. So yeah, let me know in the comment section if you knew about this, and if you did not, then I want you to, take some time to appreciate. Now, if your developers have difficulty in making things pixel perfect after the handoff, you can ask them to watch our developer handoff video. So I think it is this one. It will really, really help them sort a lot of things. With this, we finish our 2-part series on how to begin a UX project from scratch. Our next episode is on how you should plan your UX career in 2025, now that AI is changing so many things.
Over the years, I have gotten very good at finding bluff. I know who has actually put the effort and who hasn't. So, by the way, 90% of the case studies that I see are all bluff.
Keep trying in a smarter way then. Like you've tried something that hasn't worked for you, try something else, try adding more.
Having more can feel impressive, right? And the idea about packing your case study with everything as if it's the last project you'll ever work on, right? Like, let's just put everything in this. Tempting, but more likely than not, people out of the 10 case studies I see out there, there's 100 more that never made it because they got stuck in this perfection loop.
Most designers are looking for a tag. I can bet half of the people aren't even passionate about design. We're looking for the UX design tag. So if you're truly passionate about design, you'll forget the tag.
But I will not release this next video unless I get 2,000 subscribers and 5,000 comments on this video within 5 days. Each comment needs to be unique with minimum 50 characters. Now, to win a Mobbin subscription, you need to comment below your top learnings from this episode and share them on LinkedIn. Copy the link to that LinkedIn post and submit it to us via the giveaway form in description. All details are in the description and pinned comments. Now, to make sure you don't forget anything important, here are 3 checklists for each important stage of your UI designing process. First checklist is for analyzing your client brief and PRD. So you need to read the PRD or client thoroughly to understand the app's goals and purpose. You need to identify the business goals such as retention, engagement, or user acquisition, and keep those in mind when you prioritize your features. Define the primary and secondary user personas and their financial management needs because we are making a budgeting app. Then break down the problem into actionable tasks and prioritize core features for the MVP, which is the first draft of your app. When you make your components, make sure you use Mobbin and ChatGPT to list out all the potential edge cases such as empty states when no data is available, invalid inputs, or system errors. You also need to figure out all the refunds and recurring transactions because these kind of nuanced transactions become very complicated as the app scales. You need to understand basic constraints such as screen sizes, how the interface would look like when you go from an iPhone SE to an iPhone 16 Pro Max. You have to check the platform requirements like dark mode compatibility in case you're planning to scale this app into multiple themes. A lot of common mistakes that designers make include skipping over the business goal discussions and directly diving into UI, and ignoring edge cases that lead to incomplete user flows. The second checklist is for creating your first design system. You cannot begin your work unless you have defined your neutral color palette with primary, secondary, and neutral tones. The link for a detailed tutorial will be in description. You have to declare your typography styles with a simple font with enough weights like the SF Pro or Inter so your UI is easy to read, and make sure you include your headings with distinct sizes like H1, H2, H3, your body text, your paragraph text, and your labels. Then create reusable components for your buttons, which would further be segregated into primary, secondary, and disabled. Then your input fields, which would be default, tabbed, error, and disabled. Then input fields for single line inputs versus paragraph because the paragraph needs a scrollable bar. Then make sure you import a free open source icon pack such as box icons or remix icons. I will share both of their Figma links in description. Document the design system elements in a tool like Figma or Notion. A lot of people maintain it on Figma, but I would recommend you to do a blend of Figma and Notion. Build the design system as your final screens get logged in. Do not get into this hurried decision of declaring the design system before your final UI gets developed. Make sure you maintain a clean project structure and file structure across your project. I've explained this in a lot more detail in my design systems Figma episode. A lot of common mistakes include overcomplicating the design system with too many styles and unused components, and then forgetting to document how the component behaves in different states and in their edge cases. So please spend enough time on Mobbin, ChatGPT, checklist.design for mobile, and then component.gallery in case you're making something for the web. I cannot give you a checklist for your UI process because I've already given a lot of that info in my Learn UI UX.in free course. For your developer handoff, I again have made a very detailed video which I will share in the description, but the baseline requirement is that you need to organize your Figma files into clear sections with properly named layers and pages. You have to share a clickable prototype that demonstrates all of your important screen flows, your animations, and your interactions, because common mistakes that junior designers make include sharing static Figma files without clickable prototypes and not discussing all the edge cases and overlooking a bunch of edge cases during the handoff process, causing unnecessary back and forth for developers and the PM. Make sure you subscribe and share this in your college WhatsApp groups. It took me a lot of effort to write this video down. If you're interested in our professional online and offline courses for designers with more than 1 year of experience, then scan this QR code to join the waitlist. I hope that you're taking care of your mind and body. This is your dost Ansh Mehra signing out.